Yeah, so just be mindful of that if you. All right. Well, now I am going to share my screen. Okay, let's get. Come on. Here we go. Okay, get everybody out of it. All right. So rulership. We haven't really talked too much about it, though. I mean, it's really a basic tenet of astrology, and one of the things that most people probably learn early on is which planet rules which sign. So, but when you look at a chart, sometimes a planet is in a sign it rules, and a lot of times they're not. And so it's kind of like a who's in charge, or is anyone in charge? We're going to be talking about some different things that you can do when you start looking at rulership. Um, I'm going to go over the astrological calendar from starting tomorrow through our next meetup. Look at some definitions. We'll give some examples of rulerships. We have some parts to look at. Um, talk about final dispositors, dueling dispositors, mutual reception, planetary and sign signatures, chart rulers, rulers of the nativity. And in the course of all of this, we'll probably be talking a little bit also about the effects of aspect or unaspected planets and modes and elements and what I call complementary nature of rulerships. So we'll get into all of that. Feel free to ask questions as we go along because we don't, unlike most of my presentations, this one doesn't actually have a lot of slides in it. Okay, what's coming up? Let's see. Tuesday, Venus will conjunct Mars. Now, tomorrow, the moon is going to be making aspects to Venus and to Mars. So tomorrow may create a setup, give you a sense of what might be coming on Tuesday from the Venus-Mars conjunction. On the 17th, which is Saturday, we have 5 exact aspects, including the first quarter moon, square sun. On Monday the 19th, there will be 6 exact aspects, and the sun will be going into a long void of course period. Now, let's say this about void of course. Most astrologers, I would probably venture to say the great majority of them, only use void of course as it pertains to the moon, which to me doesn't make sense. I mean, the sun is the biggest, brightest, and main power source for everything. And there are times when it can it can fall within the definition of void of course quite some time. Notice here it's 70 hours, which is almost 3 days between its last aspect and the time it changes a sign. So basically, void of course is that period where the planet makes its last exact Ptolemaic aspect in a sign until it ends up when it enters the next sign. So in that interval, nobody is making a Ptolemaic aspect to the sun. That's a conjunction, a sextile, a square, a trine, or an opposition. And it long periods happen when the planets tend to be clustered, um, or if you have the planets are primarily in early degrees. So if the planets are in earlier degrees, then once the planet goes back, makes that last aspect of those planets, then it's like, yo, anybody out there talking to me? No, there's nobody there to make that aspect, to make that connection for communication or energy draw. On July 20th, the moon will go out of bounds south. So if you've been paying attention to out of bounds periods, that might be something of interest to you. 21st, the sun will enter Leo, which ends its void of course period, but then Venus has a short void of course of a little over 2 hours as it transitions from Leo into Virgo. On the 23rd, we have the full buck moon opposite the sun. So that's the full moon in Aquarius. And then also the moon returns inbound. On the 25th, Mercury will go void of course for 52 hours, give or take some change. And
could you give us an illustration of that?
I look at a Mercury void, of course, as being much like a Mercury retrograde, just without a do-over opportunity. So anything you would normally do for, if you're sensitive to Mercury retrogrades, then you'd want to also kind of follow those same rules or guidelines that you do when Mercury is void of course. On the 28th, retrograde Jupiter is going to return to Aquarius. And he will be in Aquarius for quite a while, I think up until very late this year. On the 29th, Mars goes void of course for a few hours and then joins Venus in Virgo. Interesting. For Virgos anyway. Let's see. August 1st, we have the Mercury Sun superior conjunction. This is the conjunction when Mercury is on the far side of the sun from the Earth. So basically, the sun is between the Earth and Mercury. And at that point, Mercury will be at its farthest or greatest distance from the Earth. When the superior conjunction always has Mercury direct, and the inferior conjunction is when Mercury passes between the Earth and the sun, and is when Mercury is retrograde. So there's two different conjunctions between Mercury and the sun. Unlike the outer planets, which have conjunctions and oppositions, the two inner planets, Mercury and Venus, can only be conjunct. They'll never be in opposition to the sun. And then on August 8th, which is our August meetup, we have a new moon at 16 Leo. It's also the beginning of the Islamic New Year at sundown. Footnote that I did. Okay, any questions, comments? Oh, down. Here we go. So rulerships. That's what the term, and I think I kind of got the. I think it was from Michael Moncasio. They got the idea of the planetary ladder or ladder of rulership. And it's basically how the ancients structured it. You'll notice we have the moon in Cancer and the Leo, sun in Leo at the bottom. And then as you go out from those two, we see Mercury as the ruler of Gemini and Virgo, the next two signs. And then Venus rules Taurus and Libra, the next two signs. And then we had Mars ruling Aries and Scorpio, the next two signs. And then you see Jupiter ruling the next two, Pisces and Sagittarius, and Saturn getting the final two, Aquarius and Capricorn. You see how that works? But now with modern rulership, so Uranus was discovered in 1781. And so starting basically at the top with the outermost visible planet, Saturn, they gave Aquarius to Uranus. And then in 1846, Neptune was discovered, and then so Pisces was given to Neptune. And then when Pluto was discovered in 1930, there was a lot of controversy and discussion over whether Pluto would rule Aries or Scorpio, and they ultimately decided on Scorpio. And so that's how we ended up with our modern rulerships. All right. The final dispositor is based on sign rulership. Have a final dispositor, there can be only one planet in a sign that they rule, and all of the others by disposition end up pointing back to that one planet. Now, we have some charts and we'll go through all of that so to help make it clearer. Oh, goody, here comes another. The dueling dispositors, some probably think of them as dual dispositors. I like the idea of dueling because literally when you have two planets that are in these power settings, they can start to conflict with each other or challenge each other. So after you have two planets that are in signs that they rule. So you have two planets that are in signs they rule, and the other 8 planets are all pointing back to one of those two. And then I came up with a third term I called the triumvirate, and that's where you have 3 planets in signs that they rule. If you go beyond 3, I think it gets to a point where it doesn't really, it kind of washes, everything kind of washes each other out. Mutual reception, that's when you have 2 planets in each other's signs. For example, the chart for today shows you have the sun in Leo. Now the sun's in Cancer and the moon is in Leo. So they are in mutual reception to each other because, you know, the sun is in the sign ruled by the moon and the moon is in the sign ruled by the sun. Planetary or sign signature. That's based on the distribution of the modes and elements. So you look at just the 10 planets, how many planets are in cardinal signs, how many are in fixed, how many are in mutables, and how are they split, how are they by element. And if you have a dominant mode and a dominant element in terms of your numbers, then you put the two together and you figure out, okay, what sign is that? For example, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3. One.
I can give you an example of my grandson. He's a Taurus, but when you add up the elements, and he's actually mutable air.
Mutable air. Okay, so you got a mutable air, which is Gemini. So the sign or planetary signature, the sign signature becomes Gemini, and the planetary then becomes Mercury, which rules Gemini. So that there's a hidden, I mean, a hidden strength there, particularly if it's something that doesn't show up otherwise necessarily in the chart. And then there's the phrase or term chart ruler, or some call it refer to it as ruler of the nativity. That's generally the planet ruling the sign on the ascendant. So in my case, I'm Sag rising, so that's Jupiter. And so then you look at, well, how strong is Jupiter, or how strong is that planet in a chart or your chart? And then there's a matter of the unaspected planet. That is, they are a planet that makes no Ptolemaic aspect to any of the other 9 planets. Is it strong? Is it weaker? You know, how does that planet, how is that planet manifesting itself in the person's life? Are they aware of it, or are they unaware of it? And then the complementary for I use referring to the elements. If you look at the sign and you look at the opposite sign, you will see that fire and air are always opposite each other. Earth and water are always opposite each other. And balanced, they complement each other. Fire to survive needs enough air. The air, when warmed by the fire, is comfortable. Earth needs water to keep it from drying out and blowing away. Water needs the earth to help contain it. So what happens when you've got power struggle going on between planets that are not in complementary modes? What happens when you put fire to water? The water wants to boil, the fire wants to boil the water away, and the water wants to put the fire out. With air and earth, earth wants to contain the air wants to blow the earth away. Here we go. Okay. Alrighty. So, okay, I just decided to throw this in here because sometimes we talk about a natural chart, and I'm not always sure if everyone understands what we're talking Basically, the natural chart is one where you have Aries on the ascendant, and then each house follows the zodiac in turn. So it's Taurus on the second, Gemini on the third, Cancer on the fourth, and going all the way around. That's a natural chart. So, and that's not to say that it has to be 0 Aries, as long as you have the succeeding, as long as you have Aries on the ascendant, and each subsequent house cusp has the next sign on it. Could be any degree of that. It's essentially a natural type chart. That provides for no interceptions. An interception being when you have a sign that isn't on any house cusp. And I will say one thing. I don't equate signs and houses. That is, the first house is the first house. It's not Aries. The 12th is not Pisces. It's the 12th house. And yeah, so I have one of my bugaboos is that with a lot of astrology books or websites, they will talk about, oh, like the sun in Aries or first house. Well, they're different. But they don't make that distinction. And, I can understand one reason why they tend not to make the distinction, and that is because instead of 12 definitions, you end up with 144.
Right.
But I'm not saying that, you have to believe what I believe. I'm just telling you where I'm at so that that can help you to understand where Spencer and I've talked about this a lot. We've, basically we agreed that it's not that. But let's go on. Here we go. Here we go. All right, Spencer, you're up because this is your chart.
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Yes.
All right. Well, you can see that there are many things going on in my chart, but Mercury in Virgo is my final dispositor. And this creates quite a problem for me. And I'll tell you, the first real problem is that my final dispositor is in square to Saturn, which is the second tightest square or second tightest angle and the tightest square in my chart. So you can see that this is a key thing to understand in terms of looking at the dispositor and what kinds of problems you're going to have with it. If we follow it around the chart, we can see that Venus is also in Virgo. And so that would make a lot of things in terms of how it works with Mercury would then also involve itself in creating, it's naturally in fall, and it creates the problem I have with Venus. And then if we go on, Mercury also rules my 3 planets in the 11th and 12th house. And so by ruling these planets, we also have my Aquarius moon being ruled by the Uranus, which is under the influence of the Mercury. Then we have Saturn, which is in the 11th house, which is also under the influence of Mercury. And it makes a wide, if you look at 19 to 14 degrees trine to my sun, which is involved with Venus, which is involved with Mercury. Now, if we look at the other situations here, the sun rules the Jupiter in my, not understanding the great Jupiter in my money house. However, it isn't the sign of the sun, which is under the sign of the Venus, which is under the sign of the Mercury in Virgo. And I think one of the things you can learn from having gone through this with me is that I think you have to be very aware that a final dispositor of any kind or a dual dispositor it evolves around the concept that you have at least one, the chart in a dignified sense. Both the Mercury is dignified here, and all of the other planets are ruling, coming back to him through what I call a tracing of the uh, concept of the rulership through the different contexts that the planets make. So you can see what's going on here and how it affects everything in my chart. So what affects everyone in my chart is the idea that Saturn is its tightest square. Also, my moon, which is out there lurking around, which is in Aquarius, is under the rule of a Uranus. My moon in Aquarius is, so you can also see that that's a problem. And the moon is the tightest aspect in my chart. It's the tightest trine, and it's also the tightest aspect, followed up by Saturn. And I also think this is very difficult because it makes my imagination really hyper. And I have won several Academy Awards in my mind. I've done a lot. It makes your fantasy life with Neptune very, very strong, because then we have the rulership coming from two ways, from the Uranus Mercury connection to the moon, and from the Neptune being ruled by by the Libra, which is ruled by the Sun, which is ruled by the Mercury through that sequence. So it's with the whole situation. So I really think that one of the most important things is to realize that the significance of a chart in which you have a final dispositor, I think is totally key as to what that dispositor is and its chief aspects. Because if it's the ruler of the chart and it's also a final dispositor, I mean, there's a difference between, like, we could say at one level, my moon rules the ascendant, and yet that what comes at the ascendant is coming from a moon that's in Aquarius. So that's already I don't get any escape from all of this. So does anyone have a question they want to ask me about my struggles here with this dispositor, or should we move on to
Show.
Yes, I have a question. I understand that you know your chart very well, but I don't. And I would like you to explain how you get to Mercury to be the final dispositor. Can you go step by step so I can follow?
Well, Mercury is in, you wanted me to follow its step? I just thought I did that.
Yeah, you ended by saying that Moon is the ruler of your rising. So
Well,
how does it work after that?
Well, in other words, usually this planet that rules the ascendant is called the chart ruler if you have no dispositors. And on the other hand, in this concept of using the moon, which rules Cancer, and then it's supposedly the ruler of the chart. In other words, it's not really the ruler of the chart because the chart is ruled by Mercury. But on the other hand, what I'm saying is that the natural ruler of my ascendant, and I have no water, is under the control of the moon, which is also involved in the dispositor. So the idea that I was trying to get across to at that point was just that what happens when you have this dispositor is that the ruler of the ascendant could very well be ruled by the dispositor. In fact, I think we could also argue in one sense that it has to be. But on the other hand, it's something to consider.
Hoshio, can I answer your question in a different way?
Sure.
Okay, and Spencer and Jim, you can let me know. Do you all know Ann Ortley's pinball theory? It's how we get to the rulership of a planetary rulership of a chart. Like if you look at, say, Uranus and Gemini, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. You know that phrase, all roads lead to Rome?
Right.
All roads lead to Mercury.
Right.
Is that okay? So I just want to translate it in a different brain. I teach and I learn, I teach by different brain styles and learning styles. So like if we look at Mars, Mars is in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So his Mars responds to his Mercury. Saturn's in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Again, his Saturn responds to
Mhm.
Mercury. Venus is in, oh yeah, I'll go your direction. Yeah. Pluto is in Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun. And we could do this together, Pasio. The
Yeah.
sun is in Libra. Libra is ruled by
By this, by Venus, and Venus
Bingo. And
ruled
Venus,
Mercury.
yeah, and Venus is, yeah, exactly. You got it. So you're answering your question. So instead of me doing it, you got it exactly. Venus is in Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. All roads,
What
his
happens to the
Didn't
moon?
we go through this?
No,
Moon,
I'm explaining it in a different way. Yeah, what happened to the moon? Okay, moon is in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, or yeah, so in the modern rulership, Uranus. In the ancient, yeah, they're both in Gemini. In the ancient rulership, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Uranus and Saturn
all
report
right,
to Mercury. Does that make sense? Does that help?
very much. That was really helpful.
Yeah, so it's like, it's like, I love that phrase of all the roads lead to Rome as a way to understand what planet, what planetary rulership. I was going to chime in, Spencer, by saying, and this came up, Jim and Matthew, in a prior conversation with Radalina Shanova's lecture, that your planetary arrangements aren't problematic. They may be challenging in terms of a philosophical approach to astrology, but that's what we're here to learn and to harness these adventures, these Odyssean adventures on our chart, to use them as our superpowers and gifts, skills, and talents.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Ready for the next chart? Okay, so
Okay.
now, unfortunately,
No,
not always do
I
all
want to
roads.
ask a question.
Yeah.
No, but Spencer, what do you think that Virgo Mercury, would you say, is an overall theme in your life? Because I also noticed that you have a planetary planet of a fan, which empties out on the moon, and that seems to me be pretty strong too.
Well, I think I call it a kite,
What would you?
and the kite is the
Okay.
handle of the kite is the moon, which is all puts another emphasis on the moon, and the moon is definitely under the concept of Uranus, which leads you to the Mercury. All roads lead to Rome. The the problem that I've had is that, as it's been said, and I would agree, that all of this represents a big task to deal with. How do you take these challenges and make them into growth? Well, obviously, I've been very successful in my life. I've got 2 Ivy League degrees. I'm well published, and I've been a scuba diver all over the world. So it hasn't crippled me. But what I am talking about is it has created periods of depression, and it has made me, I think, an overly critical person with everyone that I meet and everywhere I go. And I've had to overcome that and be much, much more easy on people who are talking in ways that I think don't make sense or don't understand it. So thank you very much for that question. I think I hope I've answered it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about Spencer's chart and the idea of finding your final dispositor? The black lines basically show the line of rulership. For the most, well, they're not all the same, but so you see where the moon goes to Uranus, or if you want to use the old ruler, you can go to Saturn. But since both of them are in Gemini, they both end up going back down to Virgo and Mercury. 2 Leo planets go to the sun, which is in Libra. It goes to Venus, which is in Virgo, which goes back to Mercury. So ultimately, everybody ends up pointing or finding their way back to Mercury. So yeah, he's got the grand air trine. You cannot discount that. But Mercury takes on added importance because it's like Mercury is the grand landlord of the chart. If you think in terms of when a planet is in a sign it doesn't rule, it's like renting or paying rent to the planet that rules that sign. Ultimately, everybody is paying rent to Mercury, which kind of makes Mercury like the king, if you would, the royalty of the chart in that sense. But then you have to look at what kind of aspects are being made by the planets. Grand trine, it carries weight. Got, yes, the moon in Aquarius as the chart ruler. Well, moon's not particularly happy in Aquarius. It's not, and it's in opposition to Leo, to Pluto and Leo. So, yeah, all of those things come into play. All right, but now
I-
then, what? Yes,
Jane, may I say something?
Yeah.
So I'm nowhere near well-versed in astrology like all of you are, but I'm just with regard to Spencer's chart. So the moon rules Cancer, or it's a planet of Cancer, and it's in the 7th house, which is the house of the, it's not just partnerships, but it's the house of the inner self, right? Our relationship with our inner self, our subconscious, is that correct? I thought it's the opposite to the outer. So the ascendant is the outside, how we present ourselves outside. And the opposite of that, the 7th house, is not just partnerships. My understanding, some things I've read, is our relationship to ourselves, our subconscious, the part of us that
well, I'm not gonna. I wouldn't. To me, I would think of the 12th house as being more of the inner house,
the
and
7th
in
house.
some ways, even the 1st house is more the inner house. It's me. The 7th is more about. I look at it as more about involves others.
Others. Okay.
Okay, so if the 1st is how the ascendant represents how others perceive us, the 7th then would be how we perceive others, or how we want to be perceived by others. Even you get into a very fluid thing here. The
I would
7th is
also like-
open enemies, the 12th is hidden enemies, things of that nature. Yeah, it's
So
very fluid.
okay, so it's also ruled by the 7th house is normally the house of Libra, right?
Yes.
And it's ruled by Venus, which is and so I look at what's in Libra right now is the sun, which represents the soul. And so what I'm looking at when I see this, I see the 7th house as being the opposite of the ascendant, and more like the inner self, of connecting with the self, because it's also ruled by Venus, which is love, which is how we access our soul.
Okay.
And that and if you look at the sun is at 14 degrees squaring his ascendant at 18 degrees. So I see what Spencer's challenge to his depression, or his answer to his depression, the challenge here is accessing more his inner self through the connection of the moon and the sun, the moon ruling Cancer and the sun here in Libra. Libra, in my mind, represents the neutral mind. And that's how we access our soul, and how we, it's through love and accessing our soul through the neutral mind, which goes beyond positive and negative, beyond the critical mind. And the critical mind, which is the first mind, the second mind is the positive mind, where we spin and we start thinking of positive things, like Spencer was saying, and possibilities. Well, the balancing point is Libra, the neutral mind, and he has the sun right there aspecting Cancer. So I would say that to get out of depression, which I've experienced in my life also, is accessing the inner self, the sun. And that's what his challenge is here, is to, or not his challenge, but what he's here to learn. He's a brilliant person, but to really go deep into his own heart. And that's what his chart is giving him this, because usually the square is the thing that you need to work on. So that's just, what I'm seeing here.
Oh,
I hope that makes sense what I was saying.
It does, Spencer.
It's a simplistic way of looking at it, but it's
Yeah.
I would like to point out that well, I think that's a very, once again, I'm a very critical person, but the moon in my life has been very difficult. I went through one of the most difficult divorces, in fact, two of them, which have been, I mean, absolutely rock throwing, none of which I really felt I needed to have that problem, but I got the problem. I think your idea of the subconscious and the problems I've had with this is more of a 12th house problem. And I also think that the the whole idea of with me is a Neptunian kind of problem in the fourth, because to me the Neptunian problem in the fourth is that you have an apotheosis of someone in your family, possibly. That's one of my concepts. But I think your idea about my search for the soul is very accurate. I think that I have spent a lot of time doing this. I've converted to Judaism. I've been to India to see about Sai Baba. I've gone to various other esoteric and metaphysical studies. So I think your idea about the soul search, to me, goes back to the Neptune in the remember, it's the tightest aspect that I have. And so using your concept of the moon as being the subconscious, then it's the subconscious is the first is the first aspect in my chart. So I think you have a pretty good grasp of what's been going on in my chart. And I thank you for your analysis.
you're welcome, Spencer.
Yeah, I love what you had to say, Guru Dev. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That's correct. Thank you, Katrina.
Yeah, and I just want
Katerina,
to,
sorry.
yeah,
Katrina.
it's okay. I just want to say, like, another way of framing that was, and bringing in this concept of the final dispositor as Mercury. Remember, Mercury is the trickster. Mercury is the emissary between the conscious world and the unconscious underrealms. So if we look at Mercury is the emissary between the living and the dead, and the undead realm is the realm of our unconscious. So we see your beliefs about all these aspects in your chart, Spencer, as being negative and problems and issues. And these are all things that we can bring up, these belief systems from the unconscious through Mercury to the conscious mind in order to analyze and release.
Well, I
To,
think that's true, and I don't want you to feel that I'm not understanding that Mercury is the trickster, and Mercury goes between, you know, the conscious world and the unconscious world, and it's the one that went into hell to help Ulysses. But on the other hand, I think it also has some great importance. What I have to overcome was the second tightest aspect, and the tightest square in my chart is to Saturn. So this Mercury is involved with a lot of strong judgmental problems that, if you call it the trickster, he's been, granted, caused me a lot of koans and metaphors that I've had to deal with, and I have. And so I thank you for that. I think that that's a very important aspect to bring out, that Mercury can be a trickster, and has definitely made this apparent in certain aspects of my life.
well, I also don't think that Mercury or astrology or the planets are causative. I believe that they are, you know, not just what above is so below, but with what is within is without, that the planets are a reflection of what's going on within us. And that Mercury is not causative, but it's an opportunity to analyze that metaphor as a link in the folk tale of your
Right.
living.
I think also, if you look at the tightest grand trine I've got, the tightest trine is to the moon, Neptune. So I think I have adequate trines which are positive. I certainly think that grand trine has felt me a lot of good stuff. And I think that's been very important also in you know, getting involved with this discovery of self.
Okay, I'm going to add one final comment, and I think then we need to move on. Notice that Mercury actually rules 3 of the 12 houses. It rules the 12th through Gemini, and the 3rd and 4th through Virgo. So, you know, Mercury does exert a lot of influence, but from a probably more subconscious or introverted level rather than outwardly, because we don't really, until you do this kind of an analysis, you don't really see Mercury playing that dominant a role. You know,
Yeah,
it's got the
right.
square to Saturn, and it's got the, you know, and the wide trine to the moon.
Well, the other thing about the Saturn in the 12th, it's made me a very big study of psychology, and I'm quite an advocate of Jung. So I think that it also, Saturn brought me into the desire to study the unconscious in a format that has some kind of strategy to it, and the concept of the racial archetypes, the unconscious archetypes, has also been very helpful to me. And I think that that is one of the more positive aspects of the Saturn, and has been making me try to find psychological strategies which help me understand the spiritual world.
Okay,
Let's go
thank
on
you,
to
Spencer. Going once, going twice, moving on to the next chart. All right, so now let's take a look at some dueling dispositors. Okay, it just happened. This is my chart, and it's a balance of the dueling dispositors, if you will. You'll see on the western or right hemisphere of the chart, we have Uranus and Gemini, so that goes to the ruler Mercury, which is in. There's the Sun in Virgo, goes to Mercury. And we have Saturn and Pluto in Leo going to the Sun in Virgo, which goes back to Mercury. So we've got, here's Mercury with 4 planets. But on the eastern, left-hand hemisphere, here's Venus in Libra. Notice there's Neptune, Mars, and Jupiter all in Libra. So they're all reporting to Venus through rulership. And then we have the moon in Sagittarius, which goes to Jupiter and also then back to Venus. So it's a neat split. Mercury is in a sign it rules. Venus is in a sign it rules. And they each have 4 planets reporting to them. So it's an even 5-5 split. So in this
Did you
scenario,
feel
it
like
becomes
you had a double personality?
yeah, a little split here and there. I always, yeah, most of my life I've had kind of a dual personality. The me at home was never the me when I was out in the world. The me at work wasn't the me when I wasn't at work. And so it's, you know, here it's about maintaining this, trying to maintain the balance between Mercury and intellectual, critical, analytical Virgo, and Venus and, you know, love
Nice.
thy neighbor, maintain balance, try to keep everybody happy, Libra.
Right.
At work, I always kind of enjoyed, I guess in a dark humor way, observing all the chaos going around me without being part of it. And there was a lot of it. Sometimes of which, you know, and I will admit that sometimes I might have been the instigator of it. But you follow the rulership lines. This one's, it's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
So when you have,
I can't.
you've got the dueling dispositors, that is 2 planets in signs they rule, and all the other planets pointing to one or the other of them. One of the things you want to do is you want to look at what is the balance, how many are going which way. I've got another chart where it's the extreme. Anybody want to offer any comments, questions, or thoughts
I was
here?
going to say, I had a boy in preschool who had a Libra stellium like that, and the Venus was in Libra also, ruling that stellium, and he had one in Gemini, which was no, they weren't in Libra. They were two signs next to each other. Okay, Taurus and Gemini. That's what it was. Anyway, both stellia were opposite Uranus and Saturn, and so you never knew which one you were going to see. The kid came in as a quiet, kept to himself kind of person, and then all of a sudden, if somebody thwarted him in some way, he turned violent. You would see the Uranus, bingo, you know, it would just boom. blow up. It was very difficult for him, to understand him,
Mhm.
because you saw these two different children.
Well, I never had well, I shouldn't say, never got violent, so I would get angry at times, and that I attributed to the Mars and Libra. There were times
No, but I'm
when,
saying you don't have any planets opposing them, is what I'm saying,
yeah,
as he
no.
did. It seemed to show it up even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly it would, yes. Though there were times when I could be very outgoing, and all of a sudden, like flipping a switch, just go entirely internal and go from the extrovert to the introvert at the flip of the switch.
Right.
It was one of those
Me
things that
too.
would happen occasionally. Fortunately, not very often.
Kim, this is
Yes.
Rita.
Yes,
Okay.
Rita.
I'm trying to follow.
Okay.
I know I'm way behind here, but what are the dueling dispositors?
Venus and Mercury.
Oh, Venus and Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury
Okay.
in Virgo and Venus in Libra.
Say that one more time.
Pardon?
Say that one more time, please.
Okay. It's Mercury in Virgo
Mercury in Virgo
and Venus in Libra.
and Venus in Libra. Okay.
Okay, because
Okay.
those are the two planets that are in signs they rule. The other 8 planets,
Mm-hmm.
4 of them report directly or indirectly. There's 4 that that report to Mercury through the rulership line, and 4 that report to Venus through the rulership. So it's a perfect balance of 5 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm looking at these, I'm just looking at straight number of planets. I'm not assigning in weights to any planet based upon, like sun gets 5 and moon gets 5, and I don't do any of that. This is strictly straight number split,
Okay.
and
So
it's
now the
only
other,
the 10 planets. Yes.
so now obviously there's nothing in the bottom hemisphere or the opposite, the bottom of the chart here, and it's all on the top. So how does that affect all of these?
Well, it tends to make everything
More outer?
more outward. It's more about caring. And a concern and compassion for others, though, in the world, though it doesn't always display itself well, because since there are no planets in water signs, the emotional display isn't really there often. And I intellectualize and I make a very fairly clear distinction between emotions and feelings.
Right.
And I find I can personally consider feelings much more stronger than emotions.
Now I was told that because I had no water signs, that my emotions had no place to contain themselves and that my emotions were all over the place.
Yeah,
Not
that's another
now,
way.
I've learned differently in 20 years, but in the beginning.
Not necessarily, because that can be how they may play out in your life.
Mm, okay.
Because as I often say, there are 2 sides to everything in the universe except rainbows. And so the fact that I have no planets in water signs, Spencer has no planets in water signs, you have no planets in water signs, doesn't mean that we're going to contain that our emotions or that water element is going to come out or be displayed or not displayed in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the opposite.
Yeah.
We have
And notice
to,
that, because then you look to see what planets you have in what we would call water houses based on a natural chart,
Mm.
is,
I never
4,
do
8, and
that.
12. And
right.
and so you need to look at so what are the signs on those cusps? Well, let's see, the 4th house, I've got Aries, which is a fire sign. The 8th house is Cancer, which is a water sign. And the 12th house is Scorpio, which is a water sign.
Uh-huh.
So I have water signs on 2 of those 3 houses, but the 3 planets that are in them are all in fire signs. And fire and water don't get along well.
Did you marry somebody with a lot of water?
I married my first wife was a Virgo. She didn't have a lot of water either. My current wife is a Pisces.
Mm.
There you go.
Yeah.
There
Well,
you go.
That's
that Neptune is right on the top of your chart. I mean, that's,
Yes.
to me, that's the most important one right there.
Yes. See, Neptune gains added importance because it is my most elevated planet.
Right. And it
James,
does care about others.
James?
Yeah.
So I always think of the sun as being the sole intention, and you have that in Virgo, which is scientifically analytical. And if you look at all the planets on the Mercury side, they are more analytical, with the Uranus, the Saturn, the Pluto, the Mercury. So I think your intention is one of, and then you have the Venus ones on the outer side. So I think your intention is one of knowledge, and then with the Venus of sharing it to people, which is exactly what you do. And
Mhm.
I think that you're a very giving person, which is very evident even in the way that you talk. It's very caring, and so you might not have water signs, but that Venus of wanting to care and give to people is very evident in your persona and the way that you are.
Mhm.
Especially with the moon on the ascendant in Sagittarius is one of higher knowledge and accessing knowledge through the subconscious and unconscious and archetypes, and giving, and basically it's right there on the Sagittarius of teaching. So it's very applicable to where you are, and I think this was your intention, your sole intention. And it might seem like two opposing, but it's actually working very well together, it seems.
I'd like to say that when you said Virgo was analytical, which is true, but isn't Virgo also of service?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And that's what we're seeing here.
That's right. Very, very, very much so, Rita.
Yeah. For me, when I had to come to I had to do a scientific analysis of astrology and the tarot in order to resolve in my own mind how and why they work.
Hmm.
Okay,
So you're
it wasn't
saying
a matter of
you had to come through an analytical way of getting into this.
yeah. There had to be an analytical, scientific reason why they work. It wasn't a matter of just accepting that they work by observation. I had to take it a step farther for me, and it came with I was reading an article in what Discovery Magazine or something of that nature. And it was about not an element. I'm not sure which one it was, but the article basically explained how that particular element was formed basically during the life process of certain categories of stars. And the realization, if you take the human body and you break it down, we are a combination of elements. We are a combination of these basic elemental atoms. But each one of them was created during the life process of the universe and stars in the universe. Some of them were created in red giants, from white dwarfs. They came from all different types of stars. And somehow, they got together and they came together, and voila, here I am. But ultimately, I'm made up of all these little atoms, these elements that were made from stars, were created by stars. And so that is why astrology works for me, because I am part of the universe physically,
Mhm.
okay?
Mhm.
Not esoterically, not metaphysically. I am a physical part of the universe, created from and by the universe itself. And with the tarot, I look at it and I say, okay, you go and you buy 2 tarot decks. Let's say you get two Rider-Waite decks because you know you're going to use it a lot and you want to have a spare. And you open them up and the cards are identical. That is, they appear to be identical, but they are not identical because each card is made up of unique atoms, combination of unique elements, each different from the other, each created by the stars in the universe. They have that same physical quality. Why would they work? It's that unique combination and the symbology that's on them, because ultimately our behavior is defined by the ancients and by Jung as archetypes, variety of archetypes, and it's how this combination shows how we tend to manifest those archetypes. That's what a natal chart does. It tends to show how I manifest these various archetypes and how they react or interact with each other. And so that's where my mental process takes me. And each time I pick a card from a tarot deck or somebody else picks a card from that tarot deck, they are making that physical connection between them in the universe and that card in the universe.
I agree.
My analysis was simpler than that, Jim. I totally appreciate you for that. But mine was like, well, if the moon can raise and lower the tides on the earth, and we're mostly water, I'm sure the moon and all the other planets affect us. It was as simple as that. It was like they're all affecting us. And of course, my whole with Jung was with the symbolisms was after so many dreams, I could not believe.
Yeah, it's a combination of those things. For each of us, it's our own way of coming to the conclusion, the acceptance that, yes, this works. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Thank you, James, for explaining that. That was beautifully said. Thank you.
Hey, Rita, I also wanted to answer your question, your earlier question about back to this conversation of the dispositors and his Mercury, Virgo, and Venus in Libra. You know, Jim also he presents this in his chart in the Virgo is it's discerning. It's the seed saver. It's the harvest maiden or the harvest man who collects the fruits at the end of the harvest and saves the seeds of knowledge for the winter, for the whole village, which you're demonstrating here monthly, James, right? And then there's also this mechanical aspect of Libra that we know. Oh, your question was about the elements in the water, lack of water in your chart, but I just wanted to say about Libra as the only inanimate object of the zodiac. And James, you demonstrate that kind of analytical machine-like discerning mechanical processing of your understanding even of this subject. But with the lack of water, Rita, which was your earlier question, how does one respond when an element is missing from the chart or is in less, do we respond in ways that have more emotion? But usually it's usually less, we need another human being in our life to help us serve that water, the emotional needs of the chart. So we're usually not surplus in emotion. We're usually deficient in emotion, and we find others that can help us bring those emotions and feelings to the surface.
That's not my experience. My experience is I had so much emotion, and I had to find a person to help me mediate that emotion. And I have a very similar chart to Jim's, so it's just interesting. Who knows,
But again, someone else helped mediate that.
Yes, somebody had to mediate, but not to help me get the emotion. it was to help contain the emotion and to put it in the right direction, which is very similar to, I'm a Jungian analyst and I do clients, and so
To process that emotion.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part of this can be explained by our environmental upbringings, because I
Yes.
grew up the youngest of three sons on a small eastern South farm.
Mm,
And Rita, you're from big city.
well, not the big city, but yeah, bigger than yours. Long Island, a lot of people, yeah.
Okay, next chart. This is a former client of mine. And here we see the other extreme.
Hmm.
See that down here at the bottom, we see the sun in Leo. We have Saturn in Capricorn. So they are both in signs that they rule. But if we start tracing things, we see Jupiter and Neptune in the 6th house in Scorpio. They go back to Pluto and Virgo in the 4th house. There's also Mars and Venus in Virgo going. So that we have 3 planets in Virgo. They all go to Mercury, which is in Leo. We have Uranus in Leo, and we have the moon in Leo and sun in Leo. So basically everybody is pointing back to the sun, except for Saturn, who's out here by himself in his own sign. And so here we have, 8 planets going to the sun and nobody's going to Saturn. So it's a 9-1 split. So here it's like Saturn is, you can think of Saturn as a singleton in nature. Saturn's also retrograde. And so this can make for a very difficult challenge of trying to appease or find balance for Saturn. And if we look at Saturn as representing, how we deal with reality, he wasn't always that good at it, dealing with the reality of her situation. But just, and you can see here, we got everything is in, all of these are in the second quarter or quadrant of the chart. So 9 of the 10 are below the horizon or in the northern hemisphere. Only 1 is up, and they're all in the western hemisphere. So you need to keep in
Yeah,
mind
where's the node?
the nodes. I would have to pull up her chart to look where the nodes are. There, let's see.
Okay.
I'm thinking here. 59, 13. So let's see. They're probably 1, 2, let's see.
Whose chart is this?
Yeah, 3. The former clients.
Okay.
6.
And then Matthew was asking in the questions in the chat box should we be looking at the nodes because they are tied to the luminaries such as the sun? But in planetary dignities or disposition, are you looking at the nodes or no?
No,
No.
the nodes aren't involved in this at all, which is why they're not in any of the charts.
Yes, that's what I thought.
The nodes they don't rule any signs. They are considered dignified in Gemini and Scorpio by most. North node in Gemini, South node in Sagittarius. Most references seem to come up with that alignment, but not all of them. So that's why they're not at play here. And when we throw in the nodes, then we start to get into another world of a different aspect of analysis. My point here is simply to show how you can have an extreme distribution. And so it's important to notice these things when you're analyzing a chart, because it can make a difference in terms of how, in my chart, I've got 5 and 5, which is a nice numerical balance and also an energetic balance. But the question then becomes, is the person actually living that balance? Or are they struggling with trying to achieve the balance, or are they fighting against the balance? And here we have a case where, you know, it's like balance, forget about it. Where's in lies all the struggle? And the struggle, you know, is going to be in, I think for this person was with Saturn. One, because it's out there by itself, even, and two, because it's retrograde, which makes it stronger, trying to exert itself, but at the same time having difficulty in dealing with reality at times, reality of Earth, their situation.
But it's locomotive, and Saturn is the planet that I think that it's kind of ruling the locomotive, no?
You know, the locomotive goes the other way.
Oh, the other way. Also,
Yeah,
moon.
if you turn the chart, you'll find that the moon rises first, and so the moon is the engine and Saturn is the
Oh.
caboose.
Okay.
So yeah, you have that locomotive.
Well, I'd say an awful lot happened in this first couple of years.
I'm sorry, what was that? Can you say again, please?
I said, looking at it, it seems to me that he had an awful lot of things happening in his early childhood.
Yeah. Yes, they did. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let's see. This is the chart for today's meetup at noon. This one takes us to mutual reception. That's where the two planets are in each other's signs. In this case, the sun in Cancer and the moon in Leo.
That's what I have.
Yeah, so now we have,
Hmm.
but we also have Mercury in Gemini. So there's 3 planets in signs they rule. Granted, Mercury is almost out of Gemini and will be probably by the time the meeting is over. So what happens, you know, so we start looking. So we see Pluto in Capricorn pays rent, if you would, to Saturn. Saturn's in Aquarius. Saturn goes to Uranus in Taurus, which goes to Venus in Leo. And here's Mars in Leo. So we have these planets, if you trace them, all come back and go to the sun in Cancer. Now here we have both Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. Well, Neptune rules Pisces. Jupiter is the old ruler of Pisces. So they're kind of out here in their own little world. And Mercury's in their own little world. So you have much more of from a dispositor scenario, you've got 1, 2, 3, you got 2 planets that are in the signs they rule, and that's Neptune and Mercury. But most of the planets aren't connecting to them at all. The planets are connecting to the sun and the moon, who are in mutual reception. Are we following that? And so now the mutual
Yes.
reception becomes more important. Because 7 of the 10 planets are involved in this mutual reception. If you trace the sun, the path of the planets reporting to the sun, you've got Pluto to Saturn, to Uranus, to Venus, to the sun. So all of these are reporting to the sun. 3, 4, 5. You got 6 planets that are reporting to the sun. But then the sun in turn reports to the moon. So by mutual reception, all of these planets that are reporting to the sun also report to the moon. And so you have this circle that goes on between the sun and the moon, each back to the other. And mutual receptions can, I guess you could think of them as kind of like a house swap, where you want to take a vacation. You know, you have a mountain house and you know somebody who's got a house on the beach, so you swap houses for your vacation. You want to be sure to take care of their house, so they'll take care of your house. You know, so it's kind of like you have to be considerate of the other and try to find this balancing. But because so many of the planets are involved in this, the two planets that are would otherwise be considered dueling dispositors, Mercury and Neptune, really not as important, is how I would put it. Their dispositorship carries less weight in this kind of a chart because of the power of the mutual reception. I think it tends to overpower those two. Not that they're not that they don't have weight, because interestingly, Mercury makes two aspects. Those are to Jupiter and Neptune. The two other planets that are, you know, in the Neptune and Jupiter. Jupiter's only aspect really is back to Mercury. Neptune, on the other hand, makes the aspect to Mercury, to the Sun, and also to Pluto. So Neptune's a little more involved. So of those dueling dispositors, Neptune is probably a little stronger. One, because it's retrograde, and that makes it stronger. Reasons being, when planets are retrograde, they're closer to the Earth. That's where their strength comes from, that shorter distance. But there's also a T-square involved with Moon, Saturn, Uranus. Mars also comes into that T-square with the Uranus-Mars. Let's see, as does Venus. So you got a major T-square going on here, which from a chart perspective, I think takes on the greatest power in this chart. It has extra power today because of that. And since the moon is moving into that T-square, it's applying to the square to Uranus and applying to the opposition to retrograde Saturn, it's gaining in strength as the day goes on.
Jim, I have the same mutual reception, but all my planets go to the moon except Saturn and Capricorn in the 7th house. So that stands all by itself. Is that correct?
Yeah. So how has that played out for you?
Well, mine is involved in a big T-square also. The sun, moon, the sun and Pluto are opposite the Saturn and square Uranus, which makes the T-square. I lost my mother when I was really young, and I think the Saturn in the 7th meant that I didn't trust people. I was afraid they would abandon me. It's always been a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you start to look at these charts and where you see that you have the dueling dispositors, but one of them is kind of out there by itself in that it's in its own sign, but nobody is reporting to it. Then when you start looking at the aspects and the house placement, then that then helps to bring definition, understanding to how that is playing out in one's life symbolically.
James, how did this chart affect the person with the mutual reception?
Oh, well, this is just a chart for today. It's not a person.
Oh, I see.
But as a person, if this were the chart for a person, so somebody with a mutual reception, with that kind of a mutual reception, particularly where it's the sun and the moon, they could find themselves really struggling with their own identity, or integrating in, or connecting with others. The moon being our innate inner self.
Oh, you weren't
Are,
there when I acted out my mutual reception, were you, Jim?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yes.
I have to say, yes, I had a split in my personality. I was shy,
Mhm.
quiet, but I wanted to be a performer. And I would get up and sing, even though I was standing there grasping my arms, shaking from head to foot. And I wanted to perform. So it's always been a battle.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, I think with the sun moon is in mutual reception, the individual is going to be dealing with some internal battles or struggles of some type. And there you look to see, well, we know what signs are involved, but what house are they in? What are the houses? Are they in the same house? Are they in different houses?
Mhm.
And that then can help you
Mine are,
take you to
mine,
the
mine
area of
were in
life,
the first and
perhaps.
second.
Yeah.
Is that
Here
Mhm.
with the sun in the 10th and the moon in the 11th, the struggle may have to do more with groups and authority figures, or where they really want to get recognition.
Mhm.
is mutual reception always a
What
struggle?
happens when you have two of them?
Yeah, mutual reception
I'm
requires,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the mutual reception requires two planets in each other's sign. So it could be Mercury in Libra and Venus in Virgo. It could be Jupiter in Gemini and Mercury in Sagittarius, or Pluto and, let's see, Pluto in Sag and Jupiter in Gemini, or Jupiter in Scorpio, I mean. So yeah, it's a matter of two planets, each in the sign of the other planet rules.
Can that sometimes be that they access each other better? Not that it's always a struggle.
Yes, yeah, it can go either way, because again, that's the upside is that the person is better able, is able to integrate the two, and they work together better, as opposed to creating a struggle. Usually the struggle may show up early in life, but then as the person ages, they find that they find resolution, how to deal with it, how to live with this apparent dichotomy in their life. But some can be born that way, born able to balance and deal with it. You have to look at the rest of the chart and see who's involved and what aspects are being made, the houses involved. Sun and moon are
Could you
unique
address
because,
a chart with two?
right, go ahead.
Could you address the chart with having two mutual receptions?
Oh, yeah, you can have more than one mutual reception, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, let's see where are we at right now. So
I was going to say, Jim, in the chat that BG says that she has a mutual reception, Venus and Aquarius, or he or she, I don't know, Venus in Aquarius and Uranus in Libra.
yeah, that's there's and now what's nice is that, well, at least they're both air signs, so they have the commonality of element.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kind of things you look at. Now they're different modes, cardinal and fixed, but they're the same element. With the sun and the moon, they're different modes and different elements, and they're not complementary elements. So the probability of struggle at some point, probably early in life, is probably greater for somebody like that than, say, with the Uranus in Libra and Venus in Aquarius, because they share that, they have a common element. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there may not have been, the struggle may have been not have existed at all. There may have been no struggle at all. Those are the things you look at. You don't stop when you see the sign. You then look at, well, what are the modes and elements involved?
Right, I have
What
that.
about generational ones, like
Oh,
this
yeah.
last generation had Uranus and Pisces and Neptune and Aquarius. That affects a whole generation, doesn't it?
Yeah. And there you have
What was the-
fixed and mutable. They don't necessarily get along all that well. And you have water and air.
What were the
They're not
dates for those,
complementary.
Cornelia?
What?
What were the dates for
This
those?
last generation.
What were the
Um,
dates, Jim?
Well, my
roughly?
grandson was born in 2004,
Got it.
and he has that.
mhm.
Uh-huh.
And he also has Mars and Mercury in mutual reception. But I figure that other one has to do with being affected by a whole generation.
Yes. So you could,
There's a lot of imagination in there.
yes, it can be very imaginative. They can go from a spiritual to an ultra religious extremism. But you got almost like you've got some built-in conflicts there, because the fixed nature is to maintain status quo, and the mutable is to change things, find things that need to be changed and change them. And when you're dealing with air and water, well, air can't contain water, but air can move water. And air can cause the water to evaporate, dissipate, move up, and just as it's similar to, but in a different mode from, say, fire to the water. And so they're not complementary, and so air and water don't get along that well. How many people like a hot, humid day? Not too many.
Well, I think those are the transition kids between this last era and going into the Aquarian age. It's like they're part of that conflict.
Did you find
Yes.
those dates, Jim?
No, I must confess I haven't been looking for them.
Okay.
I can, but yeah, those are the kind of things you want to keep in mind as you're analyzing the chart. And it's an easy way to drill down a little deeper without having to get into really anything extreme or unusual. You're simply looking at rulerships, the modes and elements of the signs. All right, we got some other stuff to look at, so let's move along. Okay, so here we go. Little chart shows we have the modes and the elements. So, pretty straightforward. The cardinal signs are Aries, Capricorn, Libra, and Cancer. The fixed signs are Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, Scorpio. The mutable are Sagittarius, Virgo, Gemini, and Pisces. And we see the fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sag. The earth signs, the air signs, and the water signs. Now, this is the sequence in which they repeat through the zodiac, starting with, cardinal fire, Aries. And then you have fixed earth, Taurus. Mutable air, Gemini. And then we go to cardinal water, Cancer. Fixed fire, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. But again, it's just the kind of thing, you keep it handy in your mind, so that when you start looking at things, you take a look at that aspect as well, because sometimes it will help to explain why person A with a similar aspect doesn't have problems or doesn't have the issues, has a very more positive outcome or outlook than, say, somebody B who may have what appears to be the same configuration, but because of the differences in signs and elements, for example, the way it manifests for them can be very different. All right, now let's talk about planetary signatures or sign signatures. And here's Prince William. Okay, so I've got, for that, I added these two little charts over here on the right. So he has 5 planets in cardinal signs, 3 mutable and 2 fixed. He's got 1 earth, 2 fire, 3 water, 4 air. So the dominant 5 cardinal and 4 air. Well, cardinal air is Libra. And Libra is ruled by Venus. So his planetary signature is Venus. His sign signature is Libra. Now he's got, he's got Moon, Mars and Saturn and Pluto in Libra. So those are, that's adding to it. And it's an undertone to his whole chart and personality. It becomes more of an undertone than a dominance. Now he's got a nice triumvirate that is 3 dispositors. He's got Moon in Cancer, Mercury in Gemini, and Venus in Taurus. Over here, we have 3 planets in sequence in their signs they rule. And if we start looking where everybody goes, well, the sun goes to the moon because it's also in Cancer. We have Mars, Saturn, Pluto in Libra. They go to Venus. We have Jupiter in Scorpio, which goes to Pluto in Libra to Venus. And then we have Uranus and Neptune in Sagittarius. They go to Jupiter in Scorpio, to Pluto in Libra, and back to Venus. So Mercury is kind of out here by itself. All of these planets over here in the 4th quadrant connect back to Venus. So this gives Venus added strength. We see he's a new moon type. That is the moon just past the sun in Cancer. New moon types and to change a lot. They may move a lot, get involved in a lot of different things. And I think we can see in part from his life that the heir apparent, yes, he's going there. Now, here's the thing with a triumvirate. You've got Moon, Mercury, and Venus, and those are all personal planets. If you think back, how many, can you think of any successful triumvirate that's ever ruled a country or an empire? Now, Rome tried it after Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, but it didn't work. It didn't last because there's an inherent conflict involved. You can't go 3 ways. What happens is 2 of the 3 are always going to be trying to make a deal to get what they want at the expense, perhaps, of the 3rd. And that's going to shift. It could be, Mercury and Venus working a deal at the expense of the moon, or Moon Venus at the expense of Mercury, or Mercury Moon at the expense of Venus. So triumvirates have, I think, a built-in tension and difficulty to them because of the challenge in trying to find a balance between these 3. And in his case, he's got an overloaded Venus. Now, with that, you look at his chart. Well, Jupiter is the chart ruler. And there's this other little thing hiding here because Venus is sitting on Algol, the fixed star. Symbolically, Algol is about losing one's head, more often figuratively. We see it in part because of the conflict between him and Harry. We see, it shows up, early on, he and Catherine were in a relationship, and then they were out, and then they were back in again. So when you see something sitting on, and in this case, Venus, a personal planet, sitting at 25 Taurus, 24, 25, 26 Taurus, I always kind of note that because of its placement relative to the fixed star Algol. But that's me because that's where I go to those kind of places. But you see how things line up here? You understand now you're getting the idea of the planetary sign signature, how that's done.
Well, would you give more emphasis to the moon and the sun because they're in an angular house?
Yes. But also, in this case, it would be, if the nodes are there, you would see that it's right after a solar eclipse. And because he was born on a solar eclipse, and it's 7th house, Gemini, and with him being the heir apparent to the throne of England, Great Britain, Ireland, and the British Empire, they are super strong in the way that, and I think that comes out because he was raised to be the heir. He is well aware of that. And that tends to overpower the chart for him because he has this image, sun, moon, to uphold. And so, everything else then becomes a conflict or a question or drive for attention. And you could take the Venus in Taurus and all these other planets going to Venus and say, well, okay, so, when he was looking for a wife, he was looking for somebody who is queen material, even though whether she ever has that title or not is, and the children, okay? Because as heir, your first obligation is to have another heir, to maintain the lineage. And so all of this, I think, goes to the Venus. The Mercury, it's kind of, he has to really think about his actions. He has to be very cognizant of what he does and says because of all of these factors. And because of the importance of him as the heir, unfortunately, even though as much as he may try, family, his genetic biological family, can play a secondary role to the extent that his first obligation is as his role as heir. His second obligation is as father of the next heir. And perhaps, the third then becomes, the husband.
Well, the ruler of his fifth is the one that's closest to the midheaven, and it does trine to Mercury.
Yeah. Right. Okay, we got a couple more charts.
Then
We
I'd
did.
also say his son, he's responding directly to his lineage and his responsibility to his mother.
Yes.
Top
Yep.
priority.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, pop quiz. So this is a chart of Prince Harry. So who's the chart ruler?
Oh. Saturn.
Saturn, right? Because he's Capricorn rising. Now, does Harry have a final
Saturn.
dispositor?
Mercury's in Virgo.
Venus is the,
Somebody want to talk it through?
yeah, Venus in Libra too. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So we have, let's see, Moon's in Taurus, Mercury in Virgo. There we got a ruler. Sun in Virgo, Venus in Libra. Got another ruler. Pluto in Scorpio. That's 3 planets in signs they rule. Saturn's in Scorpio, Uranus, Mars in Sagittarius, Neptune in Sag, Jupiter in Capricorn. So he's got a triumvirate. Pluto, Venus, and Mercury.
Could you also interpret Pluto's in Scorpio as ruled by Mars?
You could.
Sagittarius back to Jupiter, back to Saturn.
Mm-hmm. Which then takes you back to Pluto and Mars. If I were going to do that, I would tend to discount Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as ruling planets ruling any signs.
Got it.
But you can do that, yes. So here you got a triumvirate, you got a struggle between the three. The logic, the critical analysis, the social concerns of a Mercury and of a Virgo, with the Venus and Libra, balance, harmony, love for others, concern for others, which he has displayed in so much of his charitable work. And here, except for the moon, everybody's above the horizon.
Mm.
And the moon in Taurus is exalted.
Mm.
So he doesn't have a
And
final
it
disposition.
rules the 7th house, so he married the one he loves.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
He married for love. Everything else be damned. What's his planetary sign signature?
What's his planetary sign?
Yes. 5 mutable, 4 earth, 3 fire, 2 water, 1 air.
Virgo.
Virgo. Yep. Mutable, earth, Virgo. So Virgo, even though you got, there's Mercury and Sun in Virgo, which, pretty heavy. But when you add that his overall sign planet, his signature is also Virgo because of the abundance of mutable and earth signs. So he's going to be more down to earth. He's going to be more realistic, but he's also flexible. He also, responds to the times. And much like his mother, he has great compassion for the suffering of others, particularly with disabled veterans, since he served with so many of them. Now let's take a look at Megan's chart. Do you have any thoughts about what about his Saturn? It's unaspected.
I think that's feeling left out.
Yeah, it's in Scorpio, which is fixed water.
You say you think he feels left out, Cornelia? Could you also interpret it as him rejecting the patriarchy?
Yeah, that's part of the
Feeling that he didn't fit.
Yeah, doesn't fit in with the expectations of the royal family. So he's taking where Diana, his mother, took the royal family from its old state. You accept the fact that your husband has lovers, and you put up a good face. He's taking it to the next step. It's like, love comes first. I love my country, but I love this woman.
Well, I think
is the love for the woman is
That
stronger than the love of the country.
runs in the family, does it? Didn't that run in the family with George?
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's also him not feeling a sense that he doesn't fit in, but he doesn't feel a need to fit in, that he'll compost that entire hierarchy, leave the hierarchy, leave the country, and head out west to California?
Yeah. It's like, hey, look, I'm the spare. I've always been the spare. They've always told me I was the spare. I wasn't raised to be king. I was raised to be second in line. My brother was raised to be the king. He was, and so here he had that, some freedoms to do things that his older brother William didn't have. Okay, pop this two. Last one. This is Megan's chart.
Yeah, I think it's more than that.
chart ruler.
Mm. Mm.
That's an easy one, people. Chart ruler. What planet rules the ascendant?
Moon in Libra.
We fell asleep. Everybody take a turn. Pasha, you're
Okay.
up.
Now, here's the one. Now you got to get going here. Does she have a final dispositor?
That's what I was looking at. No,
Does he have a final dispositor? Sun in Leo.
no, because the sun is in this rose Leo.
Are you sure she doesn't?
It's the sun, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Everybody points back to the sun. Start over here with Neptune. Neptune's in Sagittarius. It goes to Jupiter in Libra, which goes to Venus in Virgo, which goes to Mercury in Leo.
right.
Here's Uranus in Scorpio. It goes to Pluto, also in Libra, to Venus, to Mercury. Here's Mars in Cancer. Goes to the moon in Libra, to Venus, to Mercury. Got all these Libra planets. They all go to Venus. Venus goes to Mercury, Mercury, Sun. So ultimately, everything comes back to the sun. So not only does she have a first house sun, but the sun is the final dispositor. You want to go on, Spencer?
It's a strong person.
What about her planetary sign signature?
Libra.
Yeah, cardinal air. Now, who else has a planetary signature of cardinal air? Somebody's chart we just looked at.
William, yeah.
Prince William. So one question is, can two Libras get along? Yes, but they can also have conflicts, can't they? They have differing.
Yeah, it's called Who's in Charge?
Yeah.
But she's, that 12th house Mars, she's the power behind the throne.
Yeah. Well, it was, according to some reports, for Harry at least, almost a matter of love at first sight.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like you enter a crowded room and you look around and you see a person, and for whatever reason, that person is the one that draws you in.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's see. Oh, she's got an unaspected Uranus, which is also getting ready to go retro, which is getting ready to go direct, actually. Uranus, Scorpio.
No one is having difficulty with the child. Gave him the wrong name.
Mhm.
Made the family even madder.
Well, what do people think of Saturn conjunct the moon, despite the fact that this is all ruled eventually by the Venus and Virgo? Doesn't that really inhibit the moon a lot? And also, the incredible, terrible role her father has been playing?
Mhm.
Not if she.
Well, she can go back and forth because Jupiter also is conjunct the moon.
Right,
Not Saturn in between, so probably she has to go back and forth.
Well, she also Like Harry.
Do your stellium thing.
Oh, yeah. She also inhales her own Saturnian authority instead of bowing to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, keep in mind, Saturn is exalted in Libra. It's also contained between the moon and Jupiter, and is on the moon-Jupiter midpoint.
Mhm.
So that trio right there has a lot of power to it, even though it pays homage to Venus, to Mercury, and the Sun. But that's a powerful stellium.
Mhm. Especially since it rules the first and the seventh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it rules the first
Right.
Cancer. It rules the sixth Sagittarius, and it rules the seventh. Yeah, Capricorn. So they have a lot of that. Stellium has a lot of influence in her life. And when you think about her career, I mean, she was very determined. Think about, when her early childhood, when she wrote a letter to the Procter and Gamble about their sexist commercial, actually changed it.
Exactly. She
Mm.
usurps power and inhales her own authority.
Yeah, which is that sun in the first, but supported by, because everybody there is supporting that sun in the first. Everybody is supporting her being her.
Right. And we see it. There's that common thing with Harry's chart. He bows not to patriarchal authority, but to his mother, and then to Meghan in return.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah.
Like if we did the synastry chart, we'd see that, but we saw them, right?
Yeah.
And this is a big theme that we're all dealing with right now with this Uranus-Saturnus square cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up for reflection.
Okay, it's getting late, so we're going to move on here. Okay, so we've talked about final dispositors and dueling dispositors, the triumvirate, which is from my thing, that I brought mutual reception, planetary sign signatures, chart or nativity ruler, which is the planet that rules the sign on the ascendant, the modes and the elements. Questions or comments on any of this?
Yeah, there's one thing I'd like to note, and that's we don't talk about this very much. We talk about missing elements, but strange things happens when you have modes very high and one or two and one is missing.
Yeah.
It really affects the behavior. I've seen that in charts of children where the mother says, I don't understand her. One day she's a sweet smiling child and the next minute she's, a terror. But she only had mutable and fixed. You either saw the mutable Pisces or you saw the fixed Scorpio.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unusual to find somebody who has no planets in a particular mode, but they are out there. And sometimes you'll find a chart for somebody who is missing two elements. They're unusual, but they offer a lot of insight into the person. So those are
Yes,
things
they
you want
do.
to keep in mind. And again, when you're doing it, only use the planets, either the 7 or 10 planets, whichever you use. Don't bring in angles, the nodes, asteroids, or anything else, because they will tend to water it down. You want to see the basic picture to start with. Then if you want to look for where is this missing mode or these missing elements, you can start bringing in some of the more other features such as Chiron, some of the other asteroids. Keep in mind, physical bodies exert physical influences. Points don't have so much the physical influence as they do a more of an emotional feeling, metaphysical influence. Upcoming attractions. Okay, so next month, I have a friend of mine, tentatively scheduled if all goes according to Hoyle. Kevin, who has developed a cloud-based astrology software called Luna Astrology. You can check out his website. September 12th, we are probably going to talk about Chiron, how he is more than just a wounded healer. October, we're going to do the third Sunday rather than the second Sunday for a couple of different reasons, since one being I'm not available. The second Sunday is actually our third wedding anniversary, and we will probably be out of town depending upon life and circumstances. But tentatively, we're going to talk about harmonics. I'm kind of thinking about maybe doing something on Halloween for talk about the astrology of serial killers, if there's people are interested in that. They are an interesting group of people.
Yes.
November, I just penned in Introduction to Prenatal Astrology only because I figured I needed to put it in there if I'm going to do it. But now we've had some other good ideas to talk about, so I think maybe we'll do something, substitute one of the others, and possibly look at the astrology of the physical body instead, perhaps for November.
Can I say something here?
Yeah, jump in, Spencer.
Well, two things. I'm finally back. I don't know what's happening to my, I've been having trouble with my Zoom, but I want to really promote this prenatal astrology because Jim is quite an expert on it. And I've been nagging him repeatedly that he should write an article on it. And I think that if he does it for us and he actually outlines what he knows about it, it'll be the first step to getting him to write this article that I know is deep inside him waiting to come out. And with that, I
Yay.
also,
Yeah, good idea. I'd like to ask one thing we haven't really covered or talked about much is patterns in charts
Yeah, that would be good.
and how you interpret the patterns.
Oh,
I
the
mean,
chart
if you're
patterns?
looking at it, yeah, because when you look at a chart, like you say, you look at things at the beginning in a holistic kind of way, and pattern is one of the ways to look at it.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we haven't talked about those for a long time, have we? Okay. We have some good ideas. If we, well, let's see. Well, we can move, so what would you like to talk about chart patterns in October? Instead of
yes,
harmonics? You think that would be more beneficial? Harmonics is
I
kind of
think so.
a bit more of an advanced topic. Okay. Let's talk about chart patterns. And chart patterns are not aspect patterns. The chart pattern is how all 10 planets lay out on a chart. Mine is an example. It's a bowl. They're all contained in one hemisphere. Some cases they're scattered all over the place. Spencer's case, he had the moon sitting over there on the left or on the right hand side of the chart all by itself. So there can be a aspect pattern within the chart pattern, but what is the chart pattern? Is it a bowl? Is it a kite? Is it a fan? A bucket?
A bucket,
Is it
a wedge,
splash? A wedge?
right?
That's a nice salad. Yeah. So we'll look at chart patterns and probably some aspect patterns along with it. Since some of the chart patterns will have them in it, we may put the two together. We'll focus on chart patterns in October. How's that sound, Spencer?
Yeah, it looks great. It looks great. I think that's exciting. And it's something we all need to look at. And especially, although I have a kite, the one that interests me the most is a locomotive. And
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, everyone should get very excited about this because it's a real help in trying to get an overview of the energies that's terminating in the chart itself.
James,
Jim, if you want to do that, I have a bunch of papers on patterns, single sheets of paper which has the pattern on it and
Oh, okay, great.
description of,
Yeah,
I
I
can
think
send
it
them
was,
to you.
I think it was Mark Edmund Jones, a famous astrologer from what, the 30s and 40s, who was one of the early ones to talk about chart patterns.
Myers has a good book on it too.
Michael Myers.
Jan-
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim, are you
Yes.
doing two in
Jansky.
October? Are you doing it on the 17th and then again on the 31st with the
Well,
serial?
the serial killers on the 31st is a maybe. Our meetup will be on the 17th. And we'll be talking about chart patterns.
Right. The 17th is a go for chart patterns and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
31st is a maybe.
Is a maybe for serial killers. Yeah, it all depends on. As it happens, the 31st is a Sunday, so
Oh, that one sounds fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so
James,
thank you, everybody. Bob, next. Oh, gee, that's wrong. Our next. Whoops.
Thank
Okay, there we
you.
go. Okay,
Thank
so our
you.
next.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, there we go. Our next meetup is Sunday, August 8th. Look forward to seeing you all then. Let me get rid of that. There we go. There's everybody. Yay.
Bye, everybody.
Any unanswered questions out there?
I'd
I
love
just
to
want-
talk about ecology and
Yes.
helping the planet more than serial killers.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's Halloween. but
yeah,
it's
but-
Halloween.
I know,
Yeah,
but then
ecology doesn't quite fit in with Halloween.
Yeah, and it's the last day
but-
of the
Yes, I know. We will put the ecology on our schedule for February. Love of the planet Earth. Love your planet. It's the only one you got.
right.
All right.
All right.
Okay, everybody. I thank you all so very much. It's nice to see everybody. Glad y'all could join us. Anybody missing? Take care. Stay cool. Be safe. Keep well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I will be sending out the link for the recording.
Oh, I have to make an announcement.
Oh yes,
Next
by all
week-
means.
Next week is my 90th birthday.
Yeah.
Oh, happy
Yay.
birthday, Cornelia.
We should do a
How
about
birthday
that?
meetup.
You know, we actually skipped that, didn't we? We usually do that at the beginning. Anybody have any other announcements they care to make?
My Uranian Times think tank is open for membership, and you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. We're having
Okay.
gorgeous conversations.
Thank you, Katharina. Okay,
Bye.
and let's see, anybody else, anywhere, anybody doing anything that they want to promote? Okay. Thank you, everybody, again for your ongoing support. You're the reason we do this. Enjoy what's left
birthday.
of your Sunday.
Okay.